So Oskar and Dan don't want to live in Sweden anymore. This video popped up recently on my feed on YouTube, and when I saw it, I was curious. I wanted to know why Oskar and Dan don't want to live in Sweden anymore. I could not believe it. And actually their YouTube channel has 230,000 subscribers, so they are reaching a lot of people with their message. So in today's video, I thought it would be fun if I do a little reaction video. I go through the video, we're watching it together for a little bit, and then I will share my opinion about if I can confirm what they're saying or if I think differently. And of course, as always, let me know in the comments down below what you think as well. Before we even dive in the video, you should tell me why you think Dan and Oskar want to leave Sweden. Subscribe to my channel and subscribe to my newsletter, where you also get a little ebook with 10 questions about if Sweden is the right fit for you. There's a link in the description down below. Let's get started. So let's start with the beginning of the video.
Why don't we want to live in Sweden? So now that we're doing our home search around the world, a lot of you guys have been asking us, why don't we just stay in Sweden? What's wrong with Sweden? And today we wanted to address that question once and for all.
Everything that's wrong with Sweden. No. If you haven't seen us before, we're Oskar and Dan. We're looking for somewhere around the world to live. We both grew up sort of in Sweden. Oskar spent his whole childhood there.
Yep.
I lived there from 9 to 19. So although now that we're almost 30 in a few years, that's not a huge portion of my life. I still feel very Swedish because those are very formative years.
Yeah.
The question everyone wants to know is, why don't we just settle down in Sweden? Our families are there. It would make life so easy.
Yeah.
We know what it's like. We could integrate well. We have friends there.
Yeah.
But still, we absolutely do not want to live in Sweden if we have a choice.
Okay, that was the first minute or so of the video where they are giving us a little bit of an insight as well, and like, you know, that they don't want to live in Sweden and maybe where they're coming from. So one is like proper Swedish and has lived in Sweden for his entire life or childhood, and the other one has lived there for like 10 years in his childhood years as well. So they kind of grew up in Sweden basically. And basically their whole channel, as I said, is like finding a place to live, although all they have done so far is just traveling around the world, living in different countries, sometimes for days, weeks, or maybe months, but never really for years as far as I understood. So the only country really they have lived in properly is Sweden for many years, and the rest is more like traveling. So you do compare a little bit, you know, countries you have traveled to when you have a day-to-day life, and obviously they mentioned they grew up in Sweden, so you also have the childhood versus your adulthood. But I think they have some nice things to say about Sweden first, so let's listen to that.
There are many things we love and we really treasure.
And some things we love even more, having spent so much time outside of Sweden, things that we have perspective on now.
I think for me, the main thing is the people and their values.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the social situation, just the fact that people in Sweden really value taking care of everyone in the country. For example, during the refugee crisis in the mid-2010s, the general attitude was, we want to help. We want to help people in need, and I think that's really beautiful.
And I think a lot of countries or a lot of cultures preach equality and this and that, but like in Sweden, it really is an internalized part of culture. Like we really believe everyone is the same, everyone is equal, everyone deserves the same rights, and that is something beautiful that you don't really find in most places. Honestly.
Especially right now with how the world is going, I still feel that although Sweden is also kind of affected by that, it's still so much better than most of the world.
So that is very interesting. I think I have not talked about this so much on my channel, and I haven't heard about that a lot either. But the good thing is with these guys is they are traveling the world, so it is interesting that they actually discover that there is great core values in Sweden and amongst the people. That is something, you know, I've never really heard from foreigners who live here, because to be fair, I have the feeling it is taking a little bit for granted. You know, it's something you don't think about quite often because it is, you know, great here in Sweden. And you live here in Sweden, you don't normally, you know, go somewhere else or live somewhere else, and therefore you don't appreciate it so much. And I know that people will probably have a lot of things to say about the refugees, you know, but honestly, like, how amazing is it that people want to help people? I think that kind of core value is so special, and we should really appreciate it and give Sweden some slack here. It is really great as a country, as people from Sweden, to have such a value. But let's continue.
We really appreciate, which is that there's so much trust from us, from all of society, toward politicians, toward any elected official or anyone in any job. The level of corruption in Sweden is truly one of the lowest in the world. It makes us so delusional about the rest of the world.
Right. That's the thing, is like, a Swedish traveler, you're so gullible so much of the time, because like you believe that everyone around you has the best of intentions always, because that's how we grew up thinking about other people, you know?
Thank you, Swedish politicians in Sweden, for being just a very trustworthy place where people do their job and don't just think selfishly.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. So public trust. I think I've mentioned it in one or two of my videos that there is, you know, bigger public trust compared to other countries. And I think that's also something really positive, as they mention it here. You don't have to fear that everyone wants to screw you over or has, you know, just wants to have your money, for example. I mean, I know it exists as well with scams here, but you have to see the bigger picture. And especially when it comes to politics, again, politics is such a complex topic that is always hard to talk about. But because you compare it with other countries, there is still so much more positive things here in Sweden than in other countries, and you have to kind of appreciate that. And the people just have more trust in politics, or in the Swedish politics, even if it's by no means perfect. And there's definitely some things I also don't agree with. But then also, I did mention that in the World Happiness Report, where it went into more details, you know, that it's not only trust to the government, but also trust in businesses and people in general.
Another thing that we value a lot now as we're getting older as well is work-life balance, and how, like, that is really like a pillar of Swedish life.
People have a very healthy attitude about it. People take vacations a lot, which I think is good from the perspective of, when you're healthy, yes, it's good to work and contribute, but people can get sick at any time or have a kid. Then having the option to, you know, not work and not be punished by society, I think is good in most circumstances. And of course, the maternity and paternity leave is awesome.
Yeah.
Work-life balance here in Sweden, it's definitely a big thing here in Sweden. Again, it's not perfect, because I also know people who sometimes have to work a little bit longer or even have to work a weekend. So it's not that the whole country has the perfect work-life balance. But again, when you compare it to other countries, it comes really, really close. And the system really cares about you resting, you not overworking you. They know that you have not only your work life, but also your private life, your hobbies, and you can have many hobbies here in Sweden, you know, you can enjoy. And we know, you know, the weather and everything, the colder and darker winters. And there is a period of time where there's the summer, and people know you have to make the most out of it. And that's why also people take long vacations sometimes in summer to really get the rest and can really enjoy the summers here. So it is a little bit of a different dynamic here in Sweden, and it does make sense, and it's quite a positive thing. But let's continue.
Just that it's relatively very, very cheap to raise kids in Sweden, at least from our perception.
Which Swedes are going to be like, what are you doing?
I know, and hold on, but like compared to what it's like in other countries, like when you talk to people in other countries, I mean, I'm not just talking about like the US in this case, like pretty much anywhere around the world, like when it comes to healthcare, when it comes to education, like childcare, that kind of stuff, like it is a huge expense, and it's something that people now, especially with the cost of living crisis and everything, think about even more than ever. But in Sweden, like, I think people don't really quite realize how good they have it. You get a child allowance every month. You get so many things paid for.
Meals at daycare. I mean, all this
School,
stuff.
yeah. And you even get university paid for as well. So it's like you do get a lot of things, right, that I think Swedes don't really treasure as much as they should.
I think honestly,
So yeah, I mean, you know, if you know my channel, that I have 2 children, and I'm sure this is one of, or maybe even the biggest reason why I think Sweden is really great. It is really set up to have children, you know, and to have the quality time with the children, especially in the first year or years. But also Sweden knows or values, you know, their workforce, and they know they have to be quite flexible around parents or for parents, because, you know, having a child or children is not that easy. But if you get the support, you know, from the system, and also, you know, from your employer, and in general, like, it is so much more joyful to first of all have kids, but also then, you know, to live in Sweden. I do know people actually who don't have children here in Sweden, but they have other reasons why Sweden is good. It's not that Sweden is only for parents, like a brilliant country, but I have to say I would maybe have a different perspective or would talk about other things more if I didn't have children. Having children here in Sweden, it was definitely one decision we made to come to Sweden because of children. One was I already had a child when we moved here, and the second one was born here in Stockholm. But I think it's really nice that they mention this here, because they're obviously quite young, they don't have children, but they do realize, you know, because they're traveling so much, that having children in Sweden is actually quite a privilege, you know, how the system is built. So I really appreciate that they mentioned that in their video. But let's continue.
About Sweden is how healthy and clean everything is, from the air to the water most of the year, to food at the grocery stores. We're so spoiled.
So spoiled.
To have all the conditions for good physical health, maybe not so much mental health, which we'll get to, but when you land and you step off a plane in Sweden,
it's like wearing an oxygen mask.
Yeah. Yeah, it feels amazing. The air smells amazing. We go swimming in lakes all the time. Swedes are so lucky for that. And also, you buy vegetables at the grocery store, and you know that compared to many other parts of the world as well, it's quite healthy and clean. So you're not just eating stuff that is, I don't know, making you sicker.
So yeah, the last point I actually say here about the good things in Sweden is the environment. Like, so much nature is here, like they mentioned the fresh air, and that's really cool that they mentioned that as well, because again, sometimes when you're surrounded by it, you don't even realize it. You have to be made aware of it sometimes to really appreciate it. And actually my partner recently also said, like, you know, he loves the water from our tap in the house. It's really, it tastes really good, it's really fresh, and like, you can't do that everywhere you go. Basically, you can't just drink tap water and not worry about it. Like, even in Germany, although you can drink tap water, it has more lime scale, at least where my parents live in the countryside, and they always buy bottled water, which is crazy. Because when I think about Germany, I would say it's similar, but no, there is still a difference. And here in Sweden, you can even, drink the water, you can be outside and have the fresh air, and, you know, we all should appreciate that more. But obviously, I'm very curious what they have to say, why Sweden is not a good country to live in. Or, I'm sorry, they didn't say that they don't want to live here in Sweden, they don't want to make it their, you know, forever home. And I'm very curious why that is, because what they have talked about so far sounds pretty good to me. So let's see what they have to say more about Sweden and why they don't want to live here.
All, because they're those types of people. But for us, the type of people we are, these things kind of bother us. And the first thing, the thing that has made me want to move since I was like 12, that exists in so many countries, but we have a specific name for it in Sweden and in the Nordics. It's called jantelagen in Sweden. In many other English-speaking countries, it's basically like tall poppy syndrome. I cannot stand this. There is nothing worse than people who are bitter and not happy about other people's people's success, I cannot fathom the idea of seeing someone you know, especially a family member, succeed and not be overwhelmingly happy for them. When I think of my cousin, for example, one of my cousins in the US who's been very successful, it fills me with so much pride and joy, and I just want to celebrate him. And to think that underlying Swedish culture to us is this constant resentment of anyone who does anything outside the norm and is successful, I cannot. You feel it everywhere. You feel it in small snide comments. Yeah. You feel it in looks. And even if people say, no, it's no big deal, or they say they're happy for you, you can tell.
You know, we can all celebrate each other for what we're doing. You know, it doesn't have to be a one-way street in any way.
And it's the same with other people. When I want to ask questions about amazing things they're doing or trips they've taken and stuff, it's like, no, I don't want to talk about me. I'm not special. And it's like, yes, every person is unique and special, and I want to hear what you have to say. But anyway, I could rant about this for a long time, but it's a huge...
If you couldn't tell that already.
It's a huge cultural irritation.
Yeah, so that is very interesting, Jantelagen, and I'm thinking about that, and I have never really mentioned that because I think maybe I do not know enough Swedish people where I could experience that. It was never an issue for me. Everyone I met, but I do meet a lot of internationals, I have to say, so maybe I'm not the right person. Maybe it's really true what they're saying. I mean, they have Swedish family and they're talking a lot about their Swedish family in this case, and also some Swedish friends they have. And that is something, again, I haven't really experienced it. I never felt awkward. You know, I share quite a bit online, even, you know, about successes. I talk with friends about it. Even my Swedish friends think they might, you know, they have traveled or they have lived in other countries, so maybe they're not the typical Swedes. Maybe a typical Swede is more, you know, follows more the Jantelagen rules. They sound a bit like crazy to me. So some make sense, you know, it makes a little bit of sense that you know, you don't want to stand out, but the standing out, I do not feel that here in Sweden so much. I know that, for example, London, where I used to live, people are very crazy and like they dress crazy, and you know, obviously it's a little bit more extreme there. Maybe it's nothing I really miss, where I say like people cannot be, you know, crazy looking here in Sweden. I mean, Stockholm would be the city, you know, where you probably could do it. So although like Stockholm is not as crazy than London, where you probably blend in more as a crazy person with the other crazy people. I don't know, sounds bad, but I mean it in a positive way. Like, you have that less here in Stockholm, but that doesn't mean you can't, you know, stand out. Or, you know, I go to a lot of events where there are speakers, like everyone is quite, you know, proud of them, what they have achieved. And you talk to these people, and it's very inspiring, fascinating. So maybe I'm just in that area where it is not a problem to talk about these kind of things. And then again, I don't have super many Swedish friends where I would feel like that is awkward. So I cannot really confirm that from my side as a foreigner, but obviously they experience that, and they have different experiences in other countries where it is not so bad, and you can just, you know, be unique and special and talk about it, basically. Let's continue.
Or when we're around Koreans, or even if we moved there, because they see us as separate.
Okay, moving on to another thing that is kind of obvious, but it's the weather. It's so funny when we're with our Swedish families or whatever, because you kind of get weather amnesia, is what I like to call it. For most of the year, it's literally some of the worst weather I could possibly imagine.
On planet Earth.
Like gray,
in southern Sweden.
Dark, overcast, spitting rain, like not fully raining, so it's like kind of indecisive weather, right? You could literally be that for several months without any sun at all. Like usually in November, there's like no sunny days in Gothenburg at least. But then as soon as the sun comes out, everyone forgets about that entire period of time.
And I don't think the problem is seasons or winter. It's just the fact that our families are from Gothenburg.
Yeah.
There, you don't have a real winter winter. You just have summer and then like 8 months of miserable, dreary weather.
Yeah, and for people who are not from like a northern or very southern place, like the changes in seasons and how dark and light it gets during summer and winter, like until you've lived through it, like do not underestimate it. Like it's crazy how much it can get to you when it's dark, so dark for 4 or 5 months of the year.
Yeah, sunrise at 9 a.m., sunset at 3 p.m. And during those 6 hours when it's light, the clouds are super low and thick. So it's basically like the equivalent of midnight there in the summer when it's super light and amazing. So
exactly. I think
So the weather is not a secret. It is not the greatest, you know, in terms of warm weather. I mean, it is not a surprise if you move to Sweden that you have longer winters and darker winters now. But I can say I have lived through 4 winters now, and I do not live in Gothenburg. I live in Stockholm, so maybe that's a little bit of a difference. I've never really been to Gothenburg either, so it is interesting. Like, I totally understand you have to get used to, first of all, the cold winters and the longer winters and the dark. I still think it is not the worst, really. The sun does go down, you know, around 3 p.m., which is quite early. But the good thing here, at least around Stockholm, is that it is often very sunny. It is actually really, really pleasant. The weather is sometimes much better than it was in London, for example, or even like in parts of Germany. And that is actually, it brings you joy during the day, or maybe at least it's not the worst. I think with the weather, it really depends who you are and what you prefer. Some people are very sensitive and they just hate bad weather, you know. And especially if you know, travel around the world, I can understand that maybe is just more attractive. You want nice weather pretty much all the time. And the hard winters, you know, you have to have thicker skin. You know, you have to be a bit more resistant during winter here in Sweden. That is definitely so true. And again, you need to figure out what kind of person you are, if you can live with that or not. I have to say, for example, I lived in Singapore for a year almost, and there it was most of the time beautiful weather. There were some monsoon times where it all of a sudden would pour down. I mean, it was like a waterfall, but it was still warm, so the warmth was always there. The light was always there, and most of the days were quite sunny. So I have experienced it. I've lived there for a year, but I realized I really, really miss the seasons. Like, I wanted it to be cold around Christmas. Snow, I mean, that is almost still a privilege. Even where I lived in Germany, snow was not always given during the winter. So having snow is something so beautiful. And obviously, the more you live north of Sweden, the more, like, it's guaranteed that you will have snow during the winter. And that's really, really cool. Like, I think, I mean, I never want to say never. I might move in my lifetime somewhere else where it's maybe warm. But at this point in my life, I really, really love the seasons. Therefore, I'm okay with, like, you know, darker winters, you know, darker days. And of course, like, I wish the winters weren't that long here in Sweden, 100%. Like, if it was just 4 months, you know, of winter, that would be great. But, you know, life is not a wish concert, like you would say in German. Das Leben ist kein Wunschkonzert. So you have to have compromises. But let's see what they else have to say about why they don't want to live in Sweden.
We get more affected by it than many other people, but that's just a really important thing for us. Like, we want to be in better weather.
Once you've experienced living in good weather, it's hard to go back.
Exactly. Okay, so the flip side to the great focus on equality, which I think is so incredibly noble and everything, I think sometimes that turns into a bit of a repressive, conformist element in Swedish culture, which is kind of interesting, where whatever makes you unique, don't let that shine too much, because we're all supposed to be the same.
So to give an example, which people are going to be so upset and disagree with it, but it is 100% true, is that although Sweden on paper is so LGBT friendly, for example, and society in general is very accepting, which is so amazing and we so appreciate it.
Yeah.
Because of this extreme conformist culture, there are still so many people who don't dare to come out because they don't want to be seen as different in any way. And even if they do come out, they have to be exactly like everyone else still. They can't like any different shows or have any kind of subculture because that's not acceptable. If you've lived in a big city like New York or London or LA or San Francisco, I'm sure it's like this in many places.
Yeah, of course. But that, like the way we know that this is true as well is that like people we talk to in Sweden, like our family or whatever, they don't know any LGBTQ plus people at all. And they're like usually shocked by it almost themselves, like why don't I know anyone? And it's like, well, yeah, it's because people don't feel comfortable coming out. Although it's like super accepting on paper, it doesn't really translate into the culture that is so conformist.
Okay. I mean, I have to say, I almost feel like I cannot say much about that because I'm obviously not part of that. So that's a very unique perspective they have. And, I cannot say like it's the opposite or it's not true or it is true. Because I obviously am not part of that. I have never heard anything either. I have met queer people, but it's probably not something you talk about when you meet someone. And I've never asked, how they feel about life in Sweden and what it is like for them. So yeah, it's really hard for me to share my opinion about that. Just in general, like everyone has to be the same and it has to, like you have to like the same shows and that kind of stuff. That is a little bit like new to me. Like I've never actually seen Sweden like that. And I also never really have experienced it. Like, again, you have, like they mentioned London and New York, and you have to understand that these are really big cities, and in big cities you literally have everyone. They are normally quite unique and special as well. They don't really represent like normally the whole country. You could tell with London, on Brexit, like London was definitely the area where they definitely didn't want to have Brexit, and then the rest of the country kind of wanted Brexit because it's very different. London and the rest of the UK is quite different, or cities and countryside is quite different. And again, Sweden is a bit smaller. Stockholm is even smaller, like compared to other capitals in other countries. So maybe it's a little bit unfair sometimes to compare Sweden with big cities or Stockholm. I mean, they're not even talking about Stockholm. They really talked about Sweden. Maybe they even talked about Gothenburg because that's where they're from. So Gothenburg is obviously also much smaller. So I can imagine that sometimes the attitude is a little bit different. But again, from my personal experience, I am not someone who stands out much, I would say, with my clothes or even the way I look, I guess. So maybe I cannot, really talk about from a perspective where someone looks different or wants to be special or unique, and then they have problems with that. But I have also not experienced, like I have seen people, speakers, dressing totally different or are super loud and they're actually Swedes, and maybe they also like went abroad and whatever, maybe they have like different experiences. But I've never really experienced that this is an issue. Maybe it's more an issue in a family, but I can also imagine that's, maybe something in other cultures as well, that families always have a bit problem if someone is a little bit different. I don't know. I cannot say much about it, but if you do, have an experience or you have an opinion about that, do let me know in the comments down below.
Personal point of view, I think another challenge about Sweden is that for us to ever integrate back into society, would be almost impossible, because now we've sort of left the boundaries of what is considered normal to a Swede. Making friends for any Swede is very, very difficult after school age. So if we were to move somewhere, even an hour away from our family and the few friends we have who still live in Gothenburg, for example, it would be impossible pretty much to make friends. Everyone hangs out with their high school friends, their middle school, or even preschool friends. Very few people hang out with colleagues. Very few people will meet someone at a restaurant or in any social setting and make new friends that way, which is very unfortunate. Even in Sweden's second biggest city, I assume it's the same in Stockholm based on what our friends tell us.
Yeah.
But because of that, the idea of us being able to create the same type of life there that we can create elsewhere just seems very unlikely. And I think that all these factors combine to make it just not the most attractive option, considering all the other options we have, even in Europe.
I mean, yeah, that obviously is a little bit of a thing in Sweden, that it is harder to make friends. But I would say they have quite a unique perspective, because they are Swedes. And I actually heard that a little bit from Swedish people who maybe moved somewhere else and then came back, and they try to start like, you know, almost a new life if they don't have their university friends or even kindergarten friends in their family. So it's quite a unique perspective to have, to be, you know, a Swede coming back. It is maybe even harder than someone like me, who, you know, doesn't have the background of like, you know, anyone knowing here, or memories of, you know, people and life here. So my mindset is totally different, because I was like, I can make friends, and I don't mind if I make Swedish friends or international friends, you know. There's so many opportunities, you know. We talked about this on my channel quite a few times, you know. If you have a hobby, yes, it is harder to just go to a cafe and talk to someone, although you could probably do that and see what comes out of it. I think it's more that you probably think, oh, no one talks to me when I'm in a cafe, and that's probably true. No one will just like come up to you and talk to you. That's not probably you know, a cultural thing here in Sweden. But that doesn't mean that you could you know, not go somewhere and just chat. Especially, again, I'm going to events and stuff like that, where it is almost a given that it's set up so you can meet other people. And yeah, it doesn't mean that all these people you meet there can be your best friends, but it's not excluded that you might find someone you connect with, and then you start to, you know, meeting up for a coffee or whatever. So it's a bit extreme that they say that, and also for them, they will never know another way, because they are Swedes, and wherever they move now, they will meet people. They will meet maybe people who live there, but probably also a lot of internationals, you know, maybe even Swedes, because the mindset is so different when you go abroad and then connecting with people. You also connect with a certain type of person, you know, someone maybe who has traveled. I think it's harder to just be friends with someone who has never really left the country, or at least has not the openness and, you know, or is curious about it. Like if someone is, you know, not interested in it, they might not be your friend, or they might not become your best friend, because you already don't really have things in common. So it really depends on like personality. But then, yeah, again, I think they obviously have a better time meeting people when they are moving and traveling around the world. It's also not a secret that, you know, Swedes are more introverted, like they're not that loud, they're not like, it's harder to randomly meet people. It has to be a little bit more structured, with like like a sports environment, or a meeting kind of events environment, or something like that. Parents of kids, for example, to meet people, and I think that's why they probably have a hard time to do that here in Sweden. They have a double hard, actually, because again, they are Swedes already growing up here. They don't have this curiosity of internationals, maybe, you know, of meeting other people. And they are also travelers. They just have experienced so many different cultures where, and as travelers and, you know, foreigners, to meet other people is just a different dimension, basically. But yeah, that was a little bit the video. So I felt a little bit better after I watched this video, because first of all, they mentioned all those positives, and honestly, all these positives, I can say I'm almost here for it, you know, for the positive sides. Then the negatives were very individual, quite, you know, I wouldn't say that everyone has maybe the same opinion or is in the same, you know, has the same lifestyle as them. Plus, there are certain type of people, you know, travelers, and I'm very curious if they actually will settle down at some point, maybe because they're getting older, they will find a country. But at the moment, I've looked through, you know, a little bit their YouTube channel as well. Like, they just love exploring other countries, and they have mentioned, you know, ups and downs of other countries. So it will be interesting to actually follow them a little bit along and see if they find a country where they actually say they will live at least a few years and then experience the day-to-day life, because it makes sense to travel and explore things, but the real life, if you want to settle down somewhere, I mean, you can travel forever if you want, of course, but if you want to get to know day-to-day life, I think that is most important to determine if you actually want to live in that country. But yeah, I'm very curious what you thought about their thoughts and about me reacting and my opinion. Let me know in the comments down below. I want to hear from you. And I think I want to end this video with saying that you always have to make some compromises. I think in every country there are ups and downs, there are advantages and disadvantages, and you just have to find for yourself the things you can accept and the things you just don't want to accept. And then it's totally fine if Sweden is not the right fit for you. I see as well in like some forums the sentiment of some people, they have lived here for a long time and they cannot integrate, they don't like it, they don't like Swedes, and that's, you know, that's fine. Like, not everyone can like everyone, you know, and if you have the option to move somewhere, you should move somewhere where you are happier, or explore other countries, more countries, to see if you like them better. But if you do like Sweden or want to hear more about life in Sweden, then make sure to subscribe to my channel, and I see you in my next video. Hej då!